King David is one of those towering figures in the Bible whose story resonates through the ages. When we talk about David, we're not just recounting history. We're diving into the life of a man who was known as a man after God's own heart. That's a pretty special title, isn't it? It tells us that David had a unique relationship with God, marked by deep faith and commitment. David's life is like a masterclass in faith, obedience, and perseverance. From his humble beginnings as the youngest son of Jesse in Bethlehem to becoming the king of Israel, his journey wasn't just about rising to power. It was about growing spiritually and morally. Each chapter of his life offers us lessons that are still relevant today. Before he was a king, David was a shepherd boy, spending his days and nights in the fields watching over his sheep. This might not sound like the training ground for a future king, but it was here that David learned some of the most important lessons about leadership and trust. Those quiet moments in the wilderness were when David developed a reliance on God's guidance and strength, not just for himself, but for the entire flock under his care. Now, imagine a young David in the fields where he wasn't just passing time. He was fighting lions and bears to protect his sheep. Yes, you heard that right. Lions and bears, as he described to Saul in 1 Samuel, chapter 17, verses 34 to 36. When a lion or a bear took a lamb from the flock, David went after it, struck it, and rescued the lamb. If the animal turned on him, he grabbed it by its beard, struck it, and killed it. David's bravery and trust in God during these moments were extraordinary. He said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." That's the kind of faith that moves mountains, or in David's case, defeats giants. David's style as a king was also quite unique. Unlike kings of later times, who might lead from behind the safety of their palaces, David was out there in the thick of battle alongside his men. This hands-on approach not only made him a respected leader, but also a beloved one. His courage and ability to lead from the front were legendary, so much so that the women sang and danced, saying, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. King David, a story rich with themes of divine favor, moral integrity, and active leadership. It's a narrative that not only provides historical insights, but also teaches us about the kind of faith and courage that stands the test of time. Whether you're a believer or just love epic stories, David's life has something to offer. King David, with his sling and his courage, wasn't just a fighter. He was a man chosen by God for a big reason. He didn't shy away from battles. Nope, not David. He ran toward them. Whether it was a lion, a bear, or a giant standing in his way, David faced them head-on, and behind him, he left a trail that told tales of his victories. Giants, wild beasts, and enemy armies, all defeated by his hand. What's remarkable about David isn't just his bravery, but his understanding of where his strength came from. He knew it was the Lord who had trained his hands for war and his fingers for battle. David saw his fighting skills as a gift from God, a tool he was given to fulfill his destiny as Israel's king. This wasn't about boasting of his accomplishments. It was about acknowledging the source of his power. Now, the story of how David came to be king is quite the tale. It starts with the first king of Israel, Saul, who didn't quite hit the mark when it came to following God's command. because of Saul's disobedience, God decided it was time for a new king. Someone after his own heart. And so, he sent Samuel, a prophet, to the house of a man named Jesse in Bethlehem, for one of his sons was to be the next king. When Samuel got there, Jesse lined up his sons, likely starting with the eldest and tallest, the ones who looked like future kings. But as Samuel went down the line, God kept telling him, not this one. God had something else in mind, something deeper than appearances. He told Samuel, "Don't look at his height or his looks. I have not chosen him. Man looks at the outward appearance, but I look at the heart." It turned out the one God had chosen wasn't even in the lineup. He was out in the fields, tending sheep. David, the youngest of Jesse's sons. When they finally called him in, and Samuel saw him, he knew right away. Here was a young man with more than just physical strength. He had a heart that matched what God was looking for. Without hesitation, Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed David in front of his brothers, marking the beginning of a new chapter. From that day on, the Spirit of the Lord was powerfully with David, preparing him for the responsibilities and challenges he would face as king. It's a vivid reminder that God's choices are based on inner values and potential, not on what we can see with our eyes. King David's story shows us that strength isn't just about how well you wield a sword. It's also about the courage to show your true feelings. He was a fierce warrior, no doubt, famously taking down Goliath with just a sling and a stone. But what set David apart wasn't just his skill on the battlefield. It was also his openness with his emotions. He wasn't afraid to let his guard down and express both his joys and sorrows. This blend of bravery and emotional expressiveness makes David a truly relatable figure. Even today, David's heartfelt expressions are immortalized in the Psalms, which he wrote throughout his life. These aren't just songs, they're outpourings of his soul where he shares his deepest feelings. In Psalm 42, for example, he writes, "As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God." This imagery shows just how much David yearned for a connection with God, likening his spiritual need to a physical thirst. His willingness to express such vulnerability is particularly striking, given his role as a king and a military leader. In times of distress, instead of bottling up his feelings, David turned to music and poetry, using these as tools to cope with his struggles and communicate with God. This openness is something that speaks to the heart of many, reminding us that it's okay to acknowledge and express our emotions, even if we're expected to always stay strong. David's life teaches us that experiencing and expressing deep emotions, including moments of despair, doesn't make one any less strong or capable. His legacy is a testament to the power of embracing all parts of ourselves, our courage, our failures, our faith. It's comforting to know that even a great king like David had his moments of doubt and sadness, yet he never let these challenges stop him from pursuing his path and his relationship with God. And that's the takeaway from David's story. It's not about how mighty you appear or how impressive your resume might look. It's about what's in your heart. David might not have been the obvious choice for king by human standards, but by God's standards, he was exactly right. This is a lesson for us all. What truly matters is on the inside. It's easy to think that being a man comes without its fair share of struggles, isn't it? We often see portrayals of men as strong and stoic, always ready to handle whatever life throws their way without a word of complaint. But let's sit down for a minute and talk about the reality. A lot of men find themselves silently battling through each day, much like King David did in his time. David, a man praised for his bravery and leadership, also knew what it felt like to be utterly overwhelmed. Picture him, if you will, returning to Ziklag, only to find everything he valued burned to the ground and his loved ones taken captive. The Bible tells us in 1 Samuel, chapter 30, verses 1 to 6, about this heart-wrenching moment. David and his men were so struck by grief that they wept until they had no strength left to cry. Can you imagine the despair that gripped them? What's more, during this time of personal crisis, David found himself on the verge of being stoned by his own men, his comrades and friends, because their grief turned to blame. In their pain, they looked for someone to hold accountable, and David, their leader, was the prime target. Here he was, the anointed future king of Israel, standing in the ashes of his home, facing mutiny from those closest to him. But here's where David's story takes a turn. Despite his circumstances, David didn't succumb to despair. But David encouraged himself in the Lord, his God. The scripture notes, this wasn't about a quick pep talk. This was a deep, soulful search for strength in his faith when all external support had vanished. He found a way to lift himself from the floor of his misery by seeking solace and strength in his relationship with God. Now, let's talk about you. Maybe you've never fought a physical battle or returned home to a burned-down house, but you faced your own battles, haven't you? Times when you felt cornered by life's circumstances, burdened by responsibilities, or overwhelmed by the expectations placed upon you as a man. It's not uncommon for men to keep these struggles to themselves. Society often expects men to be the pillars of strength, always composed, never wavering. But just like David, it's okay if you find yourself needing to cry out, to express your pain, to admit that you're not okay. It's not just okay, it's necessary. Emotional expression is not a sign of weakness. It's a testament to being human. And the silent struggle, the one you keep locked away, doesn't have to be your only reality. The alarming statistics on male suicide underscore the critical need for change. Men make up nearly 80 of suicides, a figure that speaks volumes about the mental and emotional crises many are facing without adequate support or resources. You might feel the weight of expectation to always be strong or man up. But remember, strength also comes in reaching out, in sharing your load with others, in seeking help when you need it, encouraging yourself in your own faith. Beliefs or values can be powerful, but so is finding a support system that understands and supports you. Just as David did, you can find ways to encourage yourself. Whether it's through faith, friendship, therapy, or music, find what lifts you up and holds you steady. You don't have to face your battles alone. Reach out, speak up, share your struggles. And to those who aren't struggling, look around. Your brother, friend, son, or father might be silently fighting a tough battle. They might need you to be their Samuel, someone who notices their distress and offer support without judgment. Encourage them to open up, to share their burdens. Be there to listen, really listen, without rushing to offer solutions or diminish their feelings. Sometimes, all that's needed is your presence and your empathy to make a significant difference. In closing, let me remind you once again of David's words and actions. He didn't just endure through strength of arms, but through the strength of spirit and heart. His journey teaches us that true courage isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about facing them, head-on, and finding strength in whatever source gives you comfort and hope. So, take a lesson from David. Encourage yourself in whatever way you can. Remember, you're not alone, and you're not defined by your struggles. You have the power to rise above them, to find joy and meaning in your life again. Keep pushing forward, keep fighting, and most importantly, keep encouraging yourself in your own Lord, however you define it.